Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast with me, your host, Matthew Watts, founder and managing director of Rockborn. This is a podcast where I share the stories, views, opinions and career journeys of the movers, shakers, innovators and leaders in the real estate industry. Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast. Today we're joined by the co-founder and CEO of Roebuck, Hugh Macdonald-Brown. Roebuck is an institutional-grade, pan-European real estate logistics investor who identify and create investment strategies across the risk spectrum, including core, core plus, and value add. Their current portfolio spans 7 countries with more than 100 assets and a value in excess of 2.6 billion euros. Hugh is a graduate of Cass Business School, now Bays, and started his career at BNP Paribas. He has since transacted in excess of 3.25 billion euros within the logistics sector and has key relationships with investors, occupiers, developers and lenders in all of Roebuck's target market. Hugh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Not at all. Well, look, we'll come on to Roebuck and the story and the vision and the plans you have for the future. But a place I always like to start these podcasts is, how did you get into real estate?
I knew you were going to ask this, so I should have been better prepared. But got into real estate, you're going to think this is bizarre, but when I was 16 years old, and like all these things, you're at school and you've done your GCSEs, and people start to say you need to get some work experience, put some credits on your CV, and it's hard when you're 16. You don't have a huge amount of contacts at that stage, but very lucky that my parents, my dad in particular, an old graduate, he's a lawyer, of his was a guy called Ian Watson, and for those who don't recognise the name, Ian Watson was the founder of Ashton Holdings and then latterly Hanstein Holdings. So I wrote to Ian back, age 16, no emails in those days, and just said, look, as a friend of Dad's, could I have a couple of weeks work experience? And he came back straight away. And that was it. And 2 weeks working at Ashton, and again, for those who don't know, secondary industrial, 1960s brick-clad estates. And I was just shoved in a car with whoever's going out on site, and had a lucky situation where I got to spend some time with Ian as the founder, and he's a great guy. And we went around estates, and it's not the most glamorous side of the property world, but learned a little bit in my 2 weeks, and an invaluable lesson at that stage where we used to go around these estates, and Ian would talk to all the tenants, and I would just take the notes. And I just remember my last day, we got back in the car, and he said, "What have you learned?" And I said, "Well, they all want new fencing and they want new lighting." And he said, "That's it." And amenities. And I said, "Yeah, that's it." And he said, "Well, look, if I could give you one lesson, Hugh, may that be it. Just get to know your tenants. And if you know your tenants, you'll deliver value in property." And bizarrely, even at 16, I took that lesson on board. And that was it. I'm not going to say I was away and flying in the real estate industry. I had a couple more years at school and university to follow. But my experience started 21 years ago.
And did you do some internships or work experience with other businesses in other sectors, or was that literally it and you just fell in love with these gritty regional sheds and were like, this is the life for me?
This is the beautiful stuff. No, I didn't. Yeah, love is probably a strong word, but yeah, I did work experience at GVA Grimley, Avison Young now, Cushman and Wakefield, Edgley Simpson Howe, out of town retail park agency. So a bit of a broad spectrum. And I didn't have a sector desire at that stage. That was just, again, getting runs on the board, my CV, so that one day, if I am applying for a job in this world, people can say he's got a bit of experience.
So you did history at university.
Yep.
Why didn't you do real estate?
View was, because you got good views age 18. I think sensibly or unsensibly, I thought, well, if I do real estate, of course, I'd definitely pigeonhole to real estate. And I thought, do you know what, just do a university degree that doesn't necessarily put me in that space straight away, just in case I have a change of heart. And I didn't. And parents were delighted with another years of tuition fees as I went to Cass Business School a year after I finished university at Newcastle.
So after Newcastle, you kind of realised, actually, real estate is what I want to go and do. Yeah. And so you applied to do your master's, get the kind of qualification, as it were. And then did you do the milk rounds, or did you just kind of get your first job at BNP off the bat?
Yeah, so I mean, at Cass, you do the milk rounds. And looking back now, I was woefully underprepared on some of these interviews. So again, I just thought it was a bit of a, hey, this is who I am, this is what I can do, and the job's yours. And I realised after the first couple, actually I better broaden my knowledge a little bit and be a bit better prepared. And I got a job, maybe a bit luckily, given my unprepared approach with Attis Real as it was at the time. So now BNP. And yeah, took it with both arms and said, yeah, that will work for me. And off I was into the graduation scheme. And, it was a good job for me to start with. Did I love my experience there? Probably not. Listen, you're 22, 23 at the time. You're doing valuation, property management, corporate real estate. You're moving around into 4 different departments. I made some great mates there. And that side I loved. Did my APC in 2007, passed that. But, you'll remember September 2007, it was the peak of the market and cracks were beginning to appear. And I was in the industrial leasing team. So sort of going back to what I started at Ashton and being in gritty industrial as logistics was in those days on the leasing occupier side, which has been really important in the evolution of Roebuck, which we'll touch on later. And I was sitting there and, look, that's sort of where I wanted to be. But again, it's 2007. You're in a transactions-led team, and we were 12 at the time, and transactions were drying up. And I remember being in a sort of pipeline meeting. We'd have them sort of every month. And I think our target was 4 million of fees amongst the 12 of us. I didn't know if that was realistic or not, but 6 months later, we're at £12,000. And I'm not a mathematician, which probably surprises you, Matt.
I was going to actually ask you about your, we'll come on to that in a minute, but like your schooling and like maybe some of your strengths and how you were at that. But
definitely not maths. No, but I could work out that 12,000 to 4 million, we had a gap. And look, it was clear things were going to happen and not in a positive way. So I was a bit disheartened with property at that stage. I just hadn't really enjoyed the work part of property. I loved meeting people. I think what Attis Real BNP gave me at the time, a brilliant network, and it gave you some core competencies. But the network of friends that I met there, amazing. And some of them now I'm doing business with in different places, and it's super helpful. But yeah, I needed a change in 2008.
And so you didn't like the type of work. The advisory nature is actually just didn't have the control. Whereas when you did your internship with Ian, I guess you were the principal, right? You could actually affect the change rather than advise on the change.
Yeah, I think there is a massive difference there. And I prefer being on the sort of owner-manager side than perhaps the advisory side. It wasn't that. I just think sometimes when I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's no offence to anyone at Attis, but I'm in a team of 12 people in a very tricky market. Look, industrial leasing in 2007-8 was very different to 2017-18. If I'd been there at that time, probably would still be there now and driving a very fast car and having a really nice time, because the last 5 years have been amazing for people in that space. Back in 2007 and 8, you're leasing warehouses at £3 a square foot and not in particularly nice places, and it was very, very slow paced. It's just different. It's not apples with apples. I just felt I need a change here. I'm young. I can make these changes. If you stay somewhere too long, which isn't working, I foresaw it was going to give me challenges later on.
So what did you do about that change, and what was the next step?
So and I probably should have mentioned this, but when I went to university, one of my great mates, Nick Rhodes, who's now my business partner and co-founder of Roebuck, he had got a job at a small property company based in Chelsea called City Court. And, he knew I wasn't having a great time. I was looking to make a move. And he just called me up one day and said, listen, mate, we've got another portfolio, and they had 14 different vehicles, and it's 70 odd million, and we need an extra asset manager. Would you be keen? I was like, well, I'm looking around at all the recruitment agents and the options in 2008 and thinking there isn't a lot. You weren't around then, Matt, to help me. I'm quite a two-footed, jump in 2 feet first person, and
I couldn't tell.
No, so it's I just was like, you know what, let's go and meet these people, and this is the look, there's a bad part to this story, but there's also a good part to the story. What does a 26-year-old want in life? And and I'm not having a good time. If you can get a pay increase, that's a big tick. That was a big motivator, which is probably the wrong way to look at things, but very short-sighted. I had my own office. I mean, that was cool. And we were in very smart, sort of swanky offices in Chelsea Harbour. That should have been another red flag. But again, I was like, this is really cool. And fourthly, and again, this is just the short-sightedness, but you know, when I met the owners, they drove me and took me out for lunch, and one had a Bentley and one had a Rolls Royce. And I thought, hey, this is, if they can do that from this, you know, who's to say I can't get to these
opportunity to get closer to the money. Some of that's going to trickle down into your pocket, and you can learn from people that you aspire to be. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you know, the aspirational side was more the, oh wow, where can they be? Did I aspire to them as people? Well, you'll find out in a minute. Definitely not. But that just got me away from a situation that I wasn't really happy at. So I can't remember the exact date, but September, October 2008, I leave Attis and I jump into City Court to be their asset manager.
Work alongside Nick.
Alongside Nick, which was cool. We're very different people. You've met Nick, you know. And there we were in Chelsea Harbour. It was a team of 10 people. And I was managing 400 million of, again, mainly secondary industrial. These guys basically raised money, private money, and had done very, very well from buying stuff in 2002 and trading out in 2004 and 2000, you know. Now, a lot of their sort of vehicles were acquisitions from 05, 06, 07. And I'm walking in the door, and their latest one was July 08. So, but there's a lot of assets for me to sort of manage, but very, very tertiary and secondary sort of kit, which was cool. And then things began to change. And what changed is I was instructing local, because these weren't big logistics assets. You know, I'm talking about a 10,000, 20,000 square foot unit in Cambridge or Newcastle, wherever it might be. And it needed some light capex. So I was managing all these capex budgets, going back to the finance team saying, look, this is going to be 50,000 to do a repaint, etc. It's needed. We can't get a tenant to come in without doing these works. Can I do it? Yes, you can. But these were contractors that, you know, one man in a van and, you know, young families. And I was instructing all these people, and that was all great. And I thought I was doing a really good job. And then my phone started to ring, you know, and it was, Hugh, where's my money? And I'm thinking, that's really weird. I put the invoice into the finance team ages ago. So, you know, so obviously got lost in the system. Bear with me. And I'd follow it up, and the call would come again next week. And then that call came daily, and not just one person. I had 4 or 5 contractors calling me up, crying, you know, saying, look, we've got to feed the family. Hugh, sort this out. So this was becoming too much of a hold on what else going on. I'm relatively confident, and I'm not confrontational, but if something's on my mind, I'll speak my mind. And I just walked into the CFO's office and said, listen, you know, I'm not stupid. Something is happening. You can't be missing all my invoices. What the hell's going on? And he said, yeah, we don't have any money. Right, okay. What do you mean we don't have any money?
You've got a 400 million pound portfolio here. You know, you're driving around in Bentleys. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
What do you mean?
And he said, well, you know, I shouldn't tell you this, but the portfolio that we recently bought, we're having to use surplus money from that portfolio to keep all the other portfolios alive and not being sort of taken back by the banks. And I'm thinking, hold on, that's different investors with different money, different structures. That again, in my simple terms, that's a Ponzi scheme. And he's very quick to say it's not a Ponzi scheme and we're going to be paying everyone back. But I again, was just thinking, what is happening to my life? Here I am, 4 years into my glittering career, and I've ended up in a place I didn't really want to be, and now I've gone somewhere else with a pipe dream of this is going to be amazing. And it's June 2008, and I just remember calling my parents, and I just said, you know, what am I going to do? And I remember my dad just said, you need to get out. And I remember saying, I think you're right, but there are no jobs. And it's not June 2000, sorry, it's June 2009. So Lehman Brothers, everything's gone. You know, it's and I said to Nick, who again,
I was going to say that must have been a challenging phone call. Your mate who kind of got you into the seat in the first place.
Well, no, I didn't blame Nick. You know, you got to, but you know, he was like, I said, what are you thinking? He said, no, we got to get out of this. This is, you know, the ship is going to go down, and we're going to go down with it if we're not careful. And I think that's when we said, right, let's, you know what we're going to do? Let's set up a business. And that's when Roebuck was launched. And, you know, that's, July 2009, Roebuck was off and away. And not quite how we had planned to find something.
So there's no jobs in the market, and you just kind of looked at each other and said, we've got to get out of here. Let's set up and start up a business. Where did the name Roebuck come from?
Got to be very honest on this podcast, but, you know, if you wanted one of the first name that Nick and I came up with was Corona Estates. And A, Corona after a beer is a terrible name. And two, given the Corona crisis in 2020, that would have been a disaster. So no, we very quickly, we actually met a mutual friend who said, just you mustn't call it Corona Estates. And we were sort of trying to come up with different names. And actually, I was with an ex-girlfriend, and we were having lunch in a pub called the Roebuck Inn. And I just remember saying, it was a sunny day, if I owned a pub, you know, the Roebuck's a strong name. I'd love to have a pub one day, and I'd call it the Roebuck Inn. And she actually said, why don't you call your business Roebuck Asset Management? Yeah, good idea. Called Nick straight away. I said, man, I've got it. Roebuck. He said, yeah, brilliant. What is it? Return on equity? I was like, something like that. Yeah. And that's it. So no clever sort of anagram or anything like that. Just a drink in the pub.
So did you have a business plan? Did you kind of set your roles and responsibilities split between you and Nick? Did you kind of have, you know, $5,000 worth of savings that you kind of chucked into a shared bank account? Like, what, you know, setting up a business or like coming up with Roebuck, great, but like, what tangibly did you do, and how did that play out? Like, clients, capital, deals?
Yeah, I mean, if people are listening to this, they're just going to be probably going, these guys are jokers. But, you know, let's take a step back. Number one, we were slightly forced into the situation. You know, it wasn't like we planned to launch a company and we spent 12 months coming up with a brilliant strategy and we could launch on day one. It was a reaction of a very unfortunate situation, which I now look back and go, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So it was really 2 laptops, 2 phones. What's the business plan? Let's formulate the business plan whilst we're in the thick of it. And look, we called both our parents, and you know, we were lucky enough to have parents who are very supportive, and you know, both of them lent us £15,000 each. And why 15,000? We knew we'd have some operational costs, and we worked out that actually, this is before the living crisis and high energy bills that we live in today, that we could survive on, you know, £800 to £1,000 a month. That's what, you know, give ourselves some food, be able to have a couple of drinks with a mate on a Friday night, so you can slightly de-stress from the work week. But that meant no holidays, you know, no new clothes, no gym, what I call luxury items, but that's cool. That is part and parcel of setting up your own business. But we had that 15,000 we cash flowed, sort of worked out that it would give us maybe 15 to 18 months. And we knew we needed a period of time to try and do something. So answer to your question, that was the money we had, and we had no business plan at that stage. What we knew and thought we'd do is just become an occupier-focused business. And why? Again, going back to Ian Watson, back when I was 16, and his was know your tenant, know your tenant. And again, Ian Watson's business partner, Morgan Jones, if you look at them as characters, Ian was the sort of more agency, investment-y, market-facing person, and Morgan was the sort of detailed, very methodical numbers guy. And I think, well, look, and if you ask anyone who knows Nick and I well, we're very complementary skill set. So our whole point was, you know, why not be the next Hanstein? You know, you're 27 years old and you're working from a kitchen table in Battersea. So it's quite lofty ambitions, but that was the premise of Roebuck. Just be better than any other asset manager, fund manager out there. Get in front of the tenants, know them, and somehow good things will happen.
And so you were more market facing and more trying to origination, and Nick was more kind of like making sure that he was catching everything and making sure it all stacked and you delivered what you
catching all my mistakes. Yeah.
Something like that.
I think, probably that's a fair thing. You know, the nice thing about Nick and I is we actually can do each other's jobs, but we're better placed at the different ends of each other's jobs. So yeah, probably I was more on the phone to agents trying to find deals. But look, you know, knowing what I now know, and that's not to put anyone off, anyone listening to this today, but you know, 2 27-year-olds, let's be really realistic, no real track record, newly qualified, global financial crisis, working from a kitchen table, our network was okay. We'd only had 4 years in the industry, so it wasn't huge. And we hadn't really had any institutional experience. Quite a few headwinds there to sort of get you out and about. And, that was, not going to lie, we sort of got to December, so sort of 5 months in. And look, one thing Nick and I have, and it's easy thing to say, our work ethic, I would say, is probably a real USP. We genuinely will, I think, go beyond where most people will go. And we worked every hour, but it was so speculative. We were trying to do a high street retail fund with private investors. I mean, thank goodness that didn't happen. We were trying to broker London city offices. We've never been in that sector, but when you are starting out, you are exploring everything to try and find which door unlocks probably the fastest and B is going to take you on a journey with some direction.
Give you some capital to seed your next 3 months to buy you another time to get a lead.
And that's all we're trying to do. We were just trying to sort of get fees in from somewhere. And look, you get to December, you're 5 months in and you've got 0 on the clock. And, I'm not trying to get the violin out, but we were sitting in ski jackets and woolly hats around the kitchen table because I didn't want to put the heating on in my house. It was like, let's trim every cost down as much as possible here. And I had a bit of a wobble. And I genuinely, I'm telling many people this, but I actually, Monday afternoon, I can't remember when in December, but I got myself into my bed, fully clothed, under the duvet. And anyone who knows me will say, Hugh, he's glass half full, is a bit overflowing at the time. I honestly, when there's an issue, I'll see a positive to it. I'm lucky to have that sort of mindset. But this is just, I think we'd had a bit of bad news on a deal that we've been working on, that fallen out of bed and Kel Surprise, that was just seeming to be the story of our lives. And I just got into bed one Monday afternoon. I called one of my best friends and he had recently gone out on his own and he was doing really, really well. And I just thought, just counsel time, buddy, how are you finding things? How do you do it? I'm struggling. I'm thinking of, getting my CV back out there and seeing if there's any jobs. He's like, Macca, seriously, you've got this. You've got cash flow for another 12 months. Do not throw in the towel. And I was like, mate, it's very easy to say that. But here we are on a Monday afternoon and I'm fully clothed in my bed. And I think I'm not sure. I don't think I've got
the stomach for this.
Yeah, I don't think I've got what it takes. And this is God's honest truth. He said, you do not know what's around that corner. You do not know. Do not give up. And I was like, mate, the corners are looking pretty bleak. And anyway, we finished that conversation. And this is the freaky part, but within 5 minutes, my phone goes and it's cool. Came in from a foreign guy called Alex Verhabs today. And he said, is that Hugh Macdonald-Brown? I said, yes. He said, you used to work at City Court, didn't you? Oh, God. This isn't getting any better.
He's going to ask for some money.
Find me the windowsill. And I said, yeah, I did. And he said, well, you left. I see you left a few months ago. Why did you leave? I said, listen, we're 27 years old. My business partner and I, we didn't like the way it's being run. He said, and what are you doing now? I said, didn't tell him I was lying in bed. I said, we're working from a kitchen table. We've set up our own business. We're going to be an occupier-led, best-in-class real estate investment manager. He goes, okay. I said, what's the reason for the call? He said, well, did you know your bosses, ex-bosses were crooks? I said, well, yeah, I part of the reason why I left. He said, well, I think it's very admirable that you left. Can you meet me at 8:30 tomorrow morning at the Lanesborough Hotel off Hyde Park Corner? You've got an opportunity. We've taken back the portfolio that they bought for us, and we need an asset manager. Yep, we'll meet you there at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And that was bizarre because 6 minutes prior to that, I honestly was thinking about getting my CV out and trying to find a job.
So you turned up to the hotel, 8:25, you and Nick suited and booted, ready for this meeting. Tell me about that meeting. What was the portfolio and what was the conversation?
Portfolio was secondary industrial, multi-let industrial estates, and I seem to never really got away from that. And it was 18 assets, locations all across the UK. And we'd spent that night dusting off our notes, just making sure we had an idea of what we're reminding ourselves. And yeah, we got to the Lanesborough Hotel, which is very nice, by the way. And so that was impressive, but we were super nervous. This is your moment. Don't fluffy lines. And Alex was there with two of the other investors, and they just said, right, we've got 24 hours to go to the bank, which was Santander at the time, and we've got to present a business case, and we've got to convince them not to take the keys back, and we can't have that happen. So you're coming with us to the bank tomorrow. You've got 24 hours to get yourself as match fit as possible. Fine, go through everything, look at it all. Saw the bank, got on really well with them, and now we're mid-December, and they said, look, we want to see a 5-year business plan, a cash flow with all the assets incorporated, and we want to see, this was a 75 million portfolio, the loan was 45 million, value is now 35. It's a dire straight situation. Yeah. And so they said, we've got a month, and that's Christmas, New Year, gone. I don't care. This is there's little times in your life, and everyone will get these. I'm a big believer of that, where when it appears, go for it. And so Christmas, New Year, we worked on it, presented this 5-year business case to the bank, and said, look, this is what we would do. Now, in the interim, you're never going to be the only person, trying to host the party. So we found out there was another group, not particularly nice group, that will remain nameless. And this guy was calling me all the time, trying to put me off my guard. And one day, very nicely, he called me up to say, well, not to remind me, to tell me he was a former English schoolboy boxing champion. And he would be more than delighted to show me how good he was if I didn't back out the way. Which is one of those lovely calls you get as you're trying to get yourself ready to pitch. But it was one of those things where actually just made us a bit more like, right, we're going to get this.
Bit between the teeth.
And I think the worst part, those 6 months of Roebuck, plus the 6 months at a job I didn't like, plus the 3 years of being a bit despondent about real estate as an industry, and Nick had sort of followed a similar path. We've just built quite a lot of resilience. And I think that's, with our hard work and this resilience sort of layer, I was just like, let's bring this on. So anyway, we pitched the bank end of January, and then we got a call from the borrower and the bank saying, we want to use Roebuck. It's a 5-year business plan. You're going to have a 5-year asset management contract. It's 180,000 a year. There's no assets that are going to be sold for the first 2 years because the market wasn't right to do so. Stabilize this portfolio, and then we'll look to do a divest program as per your cash flow, and look to recover the bank's position and as much of the investors as possible, which over the years we did. But that is like, oh wow, we're getting 180,000 a year. There's just 2 of us. We didn't have an office, and really cool moment when I was able to email my parents and say, Mum and Dad, just to let you know, check your bank account, because the £15,000, I've already spent 6.5 of it. I've returned it to your bank. I've just landed a 5-year contract. I'm now earning more than I would have hoped if I'd stayed at any of these jobs or pursued certain careers. So tick, I've achieved my mental goal of,
self-sufficient.
Yeah. And running's probably often walking. And that was cool. I was just, very, very thankful that I had some parents who supported this ridiculous idea of setting up a business from a kitchen table age 27 with very limited track record or contacts.
High fives all round at the Roebuck Inn with Nick.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever had a beer in a pub called the Roebuck. Do you know what? It's one of those things a bit like exams. You work so hard, and then when you come out, you're just exhausted. So there wasn't I don't think it was, Nick and I, and there's probably a weakness, and our team probably slag us off for this, but if we do a big deal at Roebuck, we're sort of on to the next, and actually you reminded me, sometimes it's good to take a step back, but I think it was more relief. But what did that do? That just gave us conversation starters, coffee bars, meetings. We had a reason to go and see people. We could get agents instructed on leasing projects. We could get building surveyors instructed on dilapidations, and investment agents on future sales. And once you start to have a commodity to potentially trade in that wider market, people then will give you time. And that's all we needed is, time in front of people, time to meet people. And I would truly back, property is not rocket science. It's, in my mind, as Ian Watson told me, know your tenants. It's protect your income, enhance your income. So we knew we could do things. We just needed the opportunity. That was the first break.
So you got the break. Did you move into offices, or did did you kind of like establish the brand, the website, get all of the business kind of set up, and then divide up your roles and responsibilities a little bit more formally and go?
Oh, Matt, I'd love to say it was as organised and as that. Again, chaos continued probably. We moved into an office, we were working from home before working from home was a thing. So we were delighted. That was really important because it's kitchen table for two people. There's a limit, I think, from a mental health point of view more than anything. But yeah, we've got an office in the West End, in Charles Street, a little size of this room, probably smaller that we're sitting in today, so about 180 square feet. 2 windows that didn't open, but nice to see. And a shared meeting room that had these shutters and blinds, which when I first lifted up was just onto a wall. But it gave a nice effect that there weren't something behind it. Pretty basic, but it was just cool to be in an office.
Roebuck sticker on the wall, desks.
Yeah. I mean, and again, you're just being so frugal. So everything was on a shoestring. But we had an office in the West End. We had some business cards, a website with 3 pages. And we were sorting out. We were, as I said, we're in play, and that's what we can ask for. And we then got a few lucky breaks through some of Nick's contacts, actually, some private clients, and we did a bit of work. We actually ended up buying an office building, and that was huge and really good fee and an asset under management. And suddenly it's like, okay, we've got this historic 75 million portfolio, plus we've now got a 30 million asset in London, and this was a wealth preservation, so this is going to be like 7 years. Okay, we still don't need anyone else at this stage. And then the next second sort of biggest break, but this was the game changer for us, as I met a guy called Paul Chidlao. That name might not mean anything to you, but he was the senior partner of Healy & Baker, which then he engineered Healy & Baker to become Cushman & Wakefield. So he was very, very senior operator in property, huge experience, massive contact book. And he was at a property event, and getting to my strengths, I'm quite good at sniffing out things and people and approaching them and not being too afraid to say hello. One of my dad's great mates had worked with him for a long time, so I had his little link to say hi, and I know Andy Gulliford, who's the mutual contact, and we got chatting, and I told him my story, because what we needed is people like him going, I've got an idea.
I'll connect you to these guys who are looking for someone just like you.
Correct.
And at the time, you're probably, you're thinking, let's win the mandate rather than charge the highest fee, so we can get that in and maybe undercut someone else who's going there because our cost base is a bit lower, and then it just builds that credibility.
100%. He said at the end of our sort of drink, give me a call tomorrow. I said, okay, fine, I'll do that. Now, he's a military man. I remember my dad's friend saying, listen, this guy, if he says 9, you don't do him at 8:59, and you don't call him at 9:01, you call him at 9. And got to 9, I called him at 9. I said, morning, Paul, it's Hugh Macdonald-Brown. We met last night. He said, good to see you can keep the time. Not many people can. So that was good. I was in, and he said, right, where are your offices? Oh, gosh. In Charles Street, but you don't need to come there. If we can meet you, mutual, you know what it's like when you're starting out. You're sort of, the illusion you've got all this great stuff, and the reality is very different. Anyway, he walked in, and he sat in our room. We didn't have a table, so it was like 4 spinny chairs sitting there in this 180 square foot non-window open room. And we chatted through, and he just said, I love your story. I love your energy. I love this operation. You keep your costs under control. Shall I tell you where I got an idea for you? Yeah, absolutely. He said, well, as of last week, it will be formally announced on the stock exchange because it's a publicly listed company, but I am going to be the non-exec chairman of Stobart Group. Right, okay. And they are in the process of buying a portfolio just over 100 million, and they have 100 million of other assets. And they brought me on because they want to use my network of real estate advisors and professionals to find an asset manager or managers to add value and look after their portfolio because they don't have the expertise in-house. Would you like to be included in the tender process?
Let me just think about that.
Let us come back to you. Quite busy on this distressed deal.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of people who want to work with us. So.
Join the queue. No, it was like, wow. And again, I don't know why, but emails weren't sort of such a thing in terms of passing documents. But 2 days later, this lever arch file came through with their whole portfolio, and we met the. Well, actually, I went sailing with my dad. This way, fine. I'm probably digressing, but Paul said he said, just give yourself a motto: stand out. Be different. I remember I was sailing with my dad and just said, Dad, I've got to be different. And my dad, being a lawyer, much more intelligent than me, and he's actually an artist now, so an artistic lawyer. I said, Dad, help me out, and maybe a few glasses of wine had been consumed or something. But he said, I've got it, Hugh. Roebuck is no ordinary animal. Put that on your pitch. I was like, Dad, it's brilliant, excellent. So we put our perspective of Roebuck and who we are, our track record. But on the first slide, Roebuck is no ordinary animal. And we went to go and see them in their Soho Square offices. And the guys, Richard Butcher, the CIO, was there. He's got a dry man from Carlisle. And we flicked over. I paused on the page, thinking, hello, he's gonna like this. He looked at it. I think he thought we were complete weirdos.
What the hell does that mean?
And I'm going, Paul, help me out here, because he was sitting next to him, and we moved on. Please, I've never ever used that motto ever again. But anyway.
I was going to say, I didn't see it on the newly branded Roebuck website. I didn't see it
no,
any part of the website.
No, it probably it's gone into the old bottom drawer and with a lock and key. But no, and then they said, listen, in 4 weeks' time, we'd like to meet you, and we're seeing 5 other asset managers. Full transparency. Come back to us. We'd like to know how you tackle our portfolio and what your skills would be and your approach. Anyway, this is again that little moment. That window's open, and Nick and I looked at each other and said, you know what we've got to do? And I said, I know what we've got to do. And what have we got to do? We've got to go and see every single asset in that portfolio. And we've got to get in front of all their tenants, and let's find everything we can do about what the tenants want, etc. Going back to that lesson I learned at age 16. So we got in our cars. We actually split because the portfolio was literally all over the country. And then we came back a few days later, and meeting notes, everything, we compiled it. I went on holiday actually, and I remember being away in Turkey, and I didn't leave my room, and literally just Googling everything we could about all these businesses, and we put together a deck, and honestly it was about 200 pages in the end. We had a cash flow for, if you want to spend CapEx, this would be the business plan. If you don't want to spend CapEx, this is the other business plan. And Nick was frantically doing all the Excel stuff, and I was probably doing the photo formatting, the value add part. and then we said, look, we'd like to come and see you in your headquarters. I know you're coming down to London, but let's come up and see where you guys operate. And he said, well, look, I'm going to be in Warrington on said date. And again, bang, we took the train up and presented Richard this 200-page plus deck, and and went through it all. I think he probably lost interest by slide 7, but at least he could see that we'd put in a lot of speculative groundwork. He said, well, look, I'm going to London tomorrow, when I thought I was going to be seeing you guys. I'm seeing the other 5 people, and look, we'll be in touch. He's not a man you couldn't read anything. I couldn't tell if it was going down well or badly, or we completely messed it up. And then again, one of those phone calls you never forget. 5 o'clock the next day, and Richard, Hugh, Nick, I'm at Euston train station. I've just finished all my meetings today. I just wanted to let you know, I always be a big believer in giving good news when good news is made available. And having reviewed all the other tenders, we're going to appoint Roebuck as our asset manager, and we're going to start you off with 30 assets. We're going to start you off with the 6 main ones. No one else is being involved, but these are the more critical time ones. And if it do a good job, that will grow. And by the way, within 6 months, we were managing all 30, which is cool. And when we remember sitting there going, wow, we said, look, out of interest feedback, why us? And he said, and I knew who the other 5 groups were, who were definitely bigger and more experienced than us. And he said, well, firstly, you came to see us in our headquarters in Warrington. We really appreciate that. Secondly, you didn't actually quote a fee, so we're going to have to work out what you're charging for this. This might actually be the shortest contract.
You're too busy formatting all the photos.
Yeah.
You forgot your piece.
No, we did it on purpose. No, we did it because it's like, you know what? We didn't need it to be huge. Let's tailor it for you. You're giving us this opportunity, and honestly, that was our rationale. And we actually take that in most of our approach with new mandates today. And thirdly, he said, you're the only one who not only saw one, but all of our assets. We made a decision this afternoon, spoke to the board, spoke to our CEO, that you guys will create more value in our portfolio and you're the partners we want to work with. Oh my goodness. Oh wow. Nick, we're gonna have to employ someone.
Yeah, I was going to say, at what stage, winning these mandates, did you start going, right,
Yeah.
we need to turn our attention to building a team here because we just don't have the resource or ability to or bandwidth, frankly, to get around all of these properties?
Yeah, no, and that became evident, and so that was the end of 2011 and start of 2012. A guy I used to work with, Charlie Seaton, lovely guy. He was at Attis and knew things weren't going well. He just had a newborn baby, and he's one of those guys. He's liked by everyone, and we'd spoken to him. He was keen to get into asset management. And we just needed, Charlie is one of the safest pair of hands. And we're like, look, DNA, character, when you're 2 to go to 3 is key. Similar age. And so Charlie joined us at that stage. And that was it. We were a 3-man band. And don't worry, I'm not going to go through this. With 2011, we're going to run out of time. But yeah, that was really, really cool. And I think the game changer is now we're reporting to a FTSE 250 company. That's great track record for us. We're going into... We're not doing it for Santander Bank. We're not doing it for very ultra high net worth individuals. We're now, presenting to PLC boards, reporting, managing their assets that have got to deliver value for their shareholders. So that's great. But the real secret in all of there, and that was not part of the pitch, but they owned Eddie Stobart. And look, we all know, all my friends know Eddie Stobart, and I think all my parents' friends know Eddie Stobart, and everyone in between. So that sort of link, which we didn't know, we didn't appreciate in 2011, but that exposed us to the logistics, operational being the key word there, and a man called William Stobart. So we started to get to know him very, very high level because he was on the third-party logistics business. We were very much on the infrastructure real estate investment side, but there was a bit of crossover. 2014, he did a management buyout with some private equity backers and took the business out of the listed arena and private. And I remember him saying, look, we're going to need an advisor. We like what you've done. I want a new site. If you can find us a site, maybe that could lead to something. And so again, didn't discuss fees, but we ended up acquiring a leasehold site for him in Dagenham, Goresbrook Park, which was a phenomenal deal. For all parties, for them, for the developer who bought it 10 days prior, when we were coming in with a 17-year lease for the whole thing. And then London Metric bought it, but they redeveloped it. It's one of those sites, the gift that keeps on giving. And if anyone's driving down the A13, you will see Eddie Stobart Distribution Park. And that's the site I was talking about. And I remember sat down with William and he said, look, go on then. What fees are you going to charge? And I said, well, look, someone would charge 10% of rent. That's not what we do. Would charge 7.5%, but we will ask for it to be paid over a 3-year period. What? Yeah, what we'd like to do is, could we be paid over a 3-year period and create an asset management agreement between us and you, and therefore you might feel that we're there and we can look after your portfolio, we could put all your leasehold assets into a spreadsheet, and we could manage it like it's a freehold portfolio. And he's like, why wouldn't I say?
So rather than just a one-off deal,
correct,
for a transactional,
yeah,
for a transaction, you created the additional value and basically increased your pie by reducing the fee or splitting it over 3 years and picking up a load of other work, and becoming a trusted advisor to him. Right?
Correct.
More so than
correct. And I just really like the guy, and again, anyone who knows me, he's my best work contact / work friend. He's a genuine friend of mine now. Some days I speak to him 10 times a day. And it's weird if I don't speak to him every day. I've learned so much from that guy. This is a guy who left school at 16 years old. This is a guy who's, reading and writing is not his strongest assets. But what has he got? Work ethic, which again, is just, I think you need. If you're ever going to be successful at all, everyone has had to work bloody hard. And he understands logistics, I would say, better than anyone in the UK. He's transported goods from A to B in the most efficient way since he was 16 years old, living in a lorry of a business called Eddie Stobart that he started with his brother Edward. So, and he goes around warehouses and he knows everyone and everyone likes him. And that is, he's been an invaluable sort of mentor to me. And that was, so what are we, breaking with the bank portfolio, then a break with the Roebuck Group, and then suddenly this, is now another client. And things are going nicely.
You scale the business, and can we just fast forward to 2020? 2019, when GFH come into the frame?
Can
you just talk to me about that decision? Because at this stage, you're established.
Yeah.
You've got a bit of a team infrastructure.
Yeah, we're to be honest, we're from a team perspective, we're only actually 4 people. So David Headley joined us from NFU in 2018. So just before we get into the GFH piece, we ended up doing some work with Korean institutional investors off the back of being a logistics expert. So that was the things that were happening in 16, 17 and 18. And we actually then got into Europe and bought some sites in Belgium, Czech Republic, managed a site in Germany and Ireland, and bought a site in Spain. So suddenly we're that pan-European, inverted commas, asset investment manager. And then, fast forward now, we're a team of 4. Our website's looking better. Our reputation is better. Our cash flow's cool. We're not a grown-up business, but we've got a hell of a journey over that last decade to get to where we've got to, and still a lot to learn. We were still very naive about how certain things worked. 2020 happens. We get a call from EY, and they're saying, "Look, we've been appointed by GFH Financial Group. I haven't heard of them. I didn't know, a Bahraini investment bank." And we're going to shortlist investment managers who specialise in logistics, ideally based in the UK with pan-European experience. I'm thinking, that list won't be extensive, but they were looking at anything from 100 people to 2 people. And we got on a call with the CIO, a guy called Nar Mustafa. And, this is conference calls. This is just before COVID. So, Zoom rage hadn't happened at that stage. So conference call, we got on quite well. Then COVID hits, and we're like, there you go. That will put an end to that. C'est la vie. These things happen and crack on. But actually what COVID did is it accelerated, because we suddenly realized you don't have to travel on a plane to build a relationship or have these meetings. And Zoom's in play. And we were Zooming with Niall twice a week, going through things. And he was like, "Have you got a business plan?" Should have had one by now, but over the last 10 years, literally still hadn't put a business plan together. He sort of said, "Right, this is, where we see things, where do you see things?" And we sort of did that. And by August 2020, so, what are we talking? 6 months, and COVID's sort of settling down, but there's 6 months of getting to know each other on Zoom. Physically haven't met the guy, but feel like I haven't spoken to anyone more over that period than him. He said, "Right, meet our CEO," met the CEO on Zoom, and we got on very well for a couple of hours and talked through how we saw things and what we needed. And they said, "Right, we want to buy 60% of your business." So, right, okay. We hadn't ever thought, we never put a for sale sign up.
I was going to say, was this part of the plan?
Matt, you're probably gauging not the plan hasn't always been a plan.
No, but in terms of, you clearly worked incredibly hard, hustled, sniffed out deals, over-delivered, created as much value as you can. But not being hand to mouth, but, chasing the next fee or the next contract. This is a big step up in terms of fresh line of capital, supercharge the business, grow up and institutionalize the platform, right? But also give up some control. So again, it's one of those things they'll remain nameless, but a big one of the top 4 accountancy firms is aware of this and said, "Look, Hugh, can I come and advise you for a small fee of 750,000 just to get this deal over the line?" You're thinking, do you know what? We're okay. We'll and so, we took no advice, and we just structured a deal with GFH where 60% gives them control, but actually they don't want day-to-day control. Management decisions to stay with Nick and I, hiring, etc., building the team, doing what we want sits with us, because they've got other things to get on with. We know what we want, and we know what gaps need to be filled. And that's crucial in the relationship, right? Because otherwise you're operating with your hand behind your back. And too many occasions you see businesses that are bought or structured like that, and the very thing that they want to buy and protect and foster and grow, they end up handicapping
Yeah.
by being overly involved with it.
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't have signed in if it had been any other way. So that was a red line point for us, and they weren't even asking for it. That was a nice thing. A nice thing with GFH is we sent the 6 months leading up to that. We've got to know them pretty well. We're completely aligned. What do we want to do? We want to build our platform, and you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said institutionalize our platform. When they bought us, we were an uninstitutional run business, the processes, the system, because as you say, the market was just moving too fast. So we were just going deal to deal to deal to deal to deal to the next. And, as a 4-man band, you don't have enough time. It's better to do the deal rather than spend time putting a system in place. And, actually they identified, we now need to bring in an analyst. We'll bring in, another analyst and finance director and Rockbourne integral to some of those hires in there. Over the next, from 18 months of their ownership, we actually did a deal with them in Spain, which was brilliant. And we're in and out, thank goodness, and peak of the market, which was great. And they delivered an amazing return for their investors. They, amazing return for themselves. And amazing for us. So, lovely start of that relationship. And we could see how quickly they could move compared to what we'd seen with perhaps our other investors from Asia, where it's a bit more slow and it takes longer. So that was great. Then we put a business plan in place, which is evolving all the time, which gave us the confidence to make these hires. And, we're now 2 people in Spain, 11 people in total, which is still, it's tiny by true sense of the word, but we now can provide that full spectrum from, cradle to grave. We've got institutional experienced people in there now. We've got proper systems, and that's what GFH have really done. They've, lifted our heads from our keyboards. It's too much. You get into the weeds. You forget there's a big world out there, and a lot of money wanting a lot of different things. And they've just said, go and open your eyes. And, they've been helpful. They've made introductions. But really, in terms of just stabilizing, getting our business into the right place, moving it into, I did a LinkedIn post when GFH got involved. This is chapter 2 of Roebuck, and we're, still at a very early stage of that chapter, but big ambitions to go and do some cool things. And yeah, that's a big part, to be fair. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing now if it wasn't for them.
When you got that unsolicited call from EY and you think, GFH coming in and they wanted to buy a stake or partner up with the business, when you and Nick entertained that, was there any conversations around, okay, we should go and talk to other parties, or we should kind of maybe look at other options, or did that not really kind of cross your mind?
Again, because we weren't advised, it's a bit like you get an agent to say your house, like, they find the people to come around and view it. You're not so good at doing that. We'd actually had an approach from 2 other groups. And one was progressing a little bit side by side. I won't say who it is. And at the time, they were actually potentially looking like, actually, that might be our more preferred route, just in terms of their turbocharged plans. We would have been joining a much more established European investment manager, but turbocharging UK. And that seemed cool. And I thank my cotton socks, is that the word? That's one thing you say when you're 5. That we didn't go down that route. It would have been the wrong route. So I think that we didn't really test anything out dramatically, but we got a sense, and I think I mentioned earlier, I'm sort of 2 feet in quite quickly, and I get a feeling, get a view, and
crack on.
Yeah, and listen, I just don't overcomplicate things in life, and if something feels right, it's got to work for both parties. I don't want to be in a situation where GFH go, why have we bought into this? This hasn't performed. So we wanted to structure a deal where, we could make their return back by doing a deal with them in Spain and hopefully hitting beyond our profit targets, which they will benefit from. And also we need someone who's going to be really supportive, but allow us to do those day-to-day things, as we touched on earlier. So no, we didn't go down a full tender process. I don't think we needed to, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, but 2.5, coming up to 3 years in November time, December time, seems to be the right call.
At the moment, can you just give me a bit of an overview of your portfolio? I know it's kind of core to kind of value add kit that you look at. Logistics, or industrial and logistics, has got lots of different niches within it.
Yeah.
Can you just break down the different parts of the niches within logistics that you look at and the strategies that you run as well?
Yeah. So again, the last 2 years have been hugely important for us, getting that structure and actually working out, a lot of our AUM have been created by a warm introduction, be it the Stobart Group, be it Eddie Stobart, be it the privates, be it bank portfolio at the beginning of our journey. And, we're grown AUM by those introductions. And the Koreans was a similar process. In 2020 in GFH, like now you've got to start thinking about more strategic product lines and how can you onboard? Is it one investor in a sort of JV capacity, or is it a commingled vehicle / fund club deal type scenario, or can you do some form of REIT or whatever it might be? So look, 2021, when we really sort of get into the guts of GFH, the market, we all know what's happened to the market. It was very hot in 2021. We actually divested a lot of our AUM, and you very kindly introduced me at the start of this. It made me sound like a rock star. I actually realised I wrote that as well on my LinkedIn profile. So it's good. It comes across well. But yeah, it's we don't have 2.6 billion under management today. That's a sort of cumulative AUM. So what we're trying to do very much today is come up with set strategy. So we've ended up doing a JV with ICG in Spain, and that's a sort of last mile urban logistics strategy. And ICG are providing all the money. We're a very small co-invest alongside them. They are a great partner, really, really user friendly. Bought 5 assets with them. We want to do many, many more. Again, market dependent. We ended up actually doing some work with Blackstone last year on a UK logistics strategy. Now, listen, they have partners everywhere, but that was really cool for us to work with them. Again, they've worked with enough operating partners that they are a great group to work with
and learn from.
Oh yeah, listen, if anyone could do anything with Blackstone, you'd be the first to do it, wouldn't you? So and that was really cool. And again, it's a badge against Roebuck's name that we can say, look, we can be a partner to these groups. And what are we doing now? We've looked at a number of different things. What we really want to focus on now is, we've got sort of capital that we've identified, probably more on a separate managed account for that core plus type return. That is really challenging today when
interest rates.
Sonia's 4.5 this morning, and therefore all-in cost of debt is 6.5, and a core product still 5. So I live really, really, really difficult. But there are some groups that is we're just analysing pipeline, and that's something that they're usually long-term contracts, and that's something that not going to set the world on fire for us, but it's an important part of the business.
Keeps the cash ticking over.
Absolutely, and they're usually bigger ticket sizes. Then we're looking at specific strategies within the logistics space, and everyone's talking about IOS, industrial open storage, and it is flavour of the year. In this month in particular, and you see different groups going out to raise. And look, we've been working in that space personally for over 10 years. And again, with my contact with William Stobart, he's owned, managed, developed and operated open storage industrial sites for the last 50 years. We've identified a really cool pipeline because it's a fragmented market.
What is industrial open storage? For someone who hasn't been reading the press, because it's everywhere right now.
Yeah.
What is that, and how would you define it?
Open storage is the storage of product outside, usually in hard concreted or tarmacked yards. And the storage of product can vary from a truck, plant machinery for construction sites, containers, that haven't been de-stuffed into warehouse space. To give you an example, NHS have a lot of containers around the UK of PPE equipment. So why we have, cars. So I didn't mention a client we got into, again, through Stobart Group, was British car auctions. Cars need to be stored somewhere. Lorries need to stop at night. Containers need to be stored outside. Plant machinery, you don't tend to store heavy plant machinery that's going off to a dirty construction site in a nice shiny warehouse. It can stay in a yard. That's what open storage, low site density, big compound yards, typically in relatively accessible locations. They don't have to be in prime locations. They're never going to be in utter prime. Maybe truck depots will be, but a storage of plant equipment, you can be a bit further off the motorway, but you need to access roads that get you to the motorway and not too much troublesome journey. That's what open storage is. Open storage is not this new sexy thing. It's been around as long as warehouse storing products been around. that it's just another function of storing a product in what we now call the logistics industrial space. And it's just offering a higher yield than buying a shiny warehouse. That's now becoming interesting in a high interest rate environment. There is not much data. So what is a true rent? I think, we're going to see that rents in that space have got a long way to go. So, it's being able to capture that rental growth. It's not hugely capex intensive because you're not piling. You tend to, key sites, which it's all about the purchase price, isn't it? If you buy it on the right basis points and the right assumptions, these could be sites that quarries or tips that actually piling is either impossible or be very expensive. So to build and construct a building is difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't concrete it and store loads of product outside. So that's the beauty of William Stobart. He has access to all these different sites, and it's a fragmented ownership.
And they're normally quite, there's not loads of them, right? Because they're quite unsightly, or they're like, secondary, tertiary locations. It's not like the council or planning is giving you loads of options to turn this.
Yeah, and there's a lack of supply, which is going to drive rents, because there'll be more demand for it and less available options for the demand to go. But there's enough supply out there if you look hard enough. And it can't be a strategy that you're waiting for a CBRE or JLL Savills brochure. No offense to those guys, they do a great job. That is not the strategy we would be looking to do. Do you know what it is? It's a sort of replica of the Hanstein-Ashton model. Higher yielding industrial assets where you can grow the income, but they tend to be not as shiny. Now, the issue you have in the secondary multi-let industrial estates today, EPC regulations and ESG considerations. When it's open storage, that's not an issue. So that again is becoming more of an interesting element for future-proofing against government regulations. So we really like the space. We are going to be trying to raise some money either through a JV partner or a club type vehicle structure. Or what I've learned at Roebuck, knock on every single door because you don't know which door's going to open. So you got to have as many conversations as possible. So that's something we're really active on. The other thing we'd love to do, and set myself up for a big fool here, but hey, you've got to try everything. As we would love to try and start a REIT at some stage. Now I look at the REIT market. All the REIT share prices are significantly down. Yeah. So they're not going to be raising money anytime soon. They've got legacy valuations they need to deal with. I'm not saying they're in a bad shape. Look at some of these guys that have done an amazing job. We've invested with them 6-7 years ago. You still made a brilliant return, but they've got now portfolios that they need to work and sweat and do things. Blackstone have taken out Hanstein, turned it into Mile Way. AJ Mucklow was taken in by London Metric. Industrial REITs recently was bought in by Blackstone. So, there's potentially a gap there. Anyone I speak to is going to say, Hugh, you're mad. You haven't got the right team size and, there's people out there. But hey, if I listened to all of that, I wouldn't have set up Roebuck. I wouldn't have won the Stobart Group, and I'd had that boxing champion guy knock me out. So the reality is, everyone could tell you it's impossible, but it's not impossible because hopefully the last few years and we've done things that people would have said, yeah, you'll never win that Stobart Group pitch, but you can. So it comes back to going to apply some hard work and see where we get to on that. So that's something we'd like to do. We'd still want to expand our footprint in Europe, but that we're conscious. You hear people all the time, we're going to do this, and this. There's only a certain amount of hours in the day. And I think with GFH, we're getting that focus. So let's focus on the iOS strategy. Let's keep the SMA JV working with the groups. We're doing one at the moment in the UK. It's in React News, but I won't name because we haven't officially sort of signed up terms yet. But we're trying to buy a couple of assets with a large group, sovereign wealth fund, for a period of time in UK logistics. So that would be great. So people like that would be awesome. Then we can try the iOS strategy and at the same time maybe start to work on a REIT thing. Pause, see how each thing's going. Listen, that's not all going to go according to plan. One might happen, one might not, both might not. Whatever happens, we'll learn something that will then maybe lead to another door. So that's what we're looking to do. Working with GFH, we might establish an office in the GCC region. No joke. That is a lot of money being focused on there. Logistics is 10, 15 years behind where we are. And human behavior is pretty similar across the world. They're going to be developing out a lot of logistics products, and maybe people like us can add a layer of expertise and a USP to a GFH. They were setting up a local fund, which they're looking to do. So it's exciting. Yeah.
You clearly own, and focus on that logistics space, and then the various different niches within it. But also you've got a couple of different buckets or pots of capital or types of deals. Have you ever thought about diversifying and maybe going into another sector? I know initially when we started this conversation, when you're looking at setting Roebuck up, is city offices or retail. Have you ever thought about diversifying that or not?
You read every day, and yes, PBSA and student housing and life sciences, and you're thinking,
data centers is obviously quite closely tied.
And I know we've actually managed a data center back in 2012 and sold that in 2017. That's one deal, so it's not a huge track record, but I think the issue for us is, I think people now, money LP investors, they want to focus. They want a manager that's focused on a specific area. And one thing we take pride on is we genuinely, and I know it's really easy to say, but we are completely obsessed by the occupier. It is our thing. Being retained by Eddie Stobart, that's now part of a bigger group called Kalina Group. That's 22 million square feet across the UK. We have access to that portfolio. We see different things that other managers just do not see. And, that's invaluable to us. That gives us an edge. And it's not an edge to try and knock someone out of the way. It's just to give us a point of difference that an investor might say, I really want to tap into that DNA. And I think we don't want to lose that obsession. If you ask Charlie Seaton, the guy who joined back in 2012, he's been with us now over 11 years. He tracks the CBRE Savills take up. Yeah, but we've got our own data. And so he then has calls with the likes of Kevin Moffat at Savills to say, why have you got to 6.6 million square feet in Q1? What am I missing? I'm at 5. And actually, he might have accounted something that we haven't. And that data we are building is invaluable. Now,
because it gives you an edge, or what?
Well, then it means you can make
insight on what decision
you can make sensible investment decisions. And
does the data precede the underwrite?
The data informs the underwrite. So i.e., what rental growth are you going to assume or not? What rent are you going to assume at lease expiry? What should you be scared of? Actually, again, this not telling tales out of school, but Charlie had a call with an agent from Sheffield, Yorkshire region, and they were saying there is no stock, Charlie. Charlie said, I'm just not following this. You got 5 minutes, and the guy said there's only 600,000 square feet available. This is why rents are going to grow. And Charlie said, well, I've got 6.4 million, and went through every scheme, and the agent said, oh yeah, if you include, yeah, and so that might mean be a bit. Look, agents do a great job. There's no belittling of them at all, but it's you have to also have your own sort of data to form your own views. And this is a really long-winded response to would we diversify our logistics? But our whole premise is we're not a big enough team. We're not set up to go and have that in-depth knowledge about another sector. And I think for us right here, right now, we could sit in front of anyone. I'd feel more confident than anything, sitting in front of any LP investor or potential partner and say, look, we really know what we're doing in this space. And our key difference is we're completely led by the occupier. And I know everyone says we've got great occupier relationships. I challenge them that they have as deep-rooted relationships as we do, because purely through that Eddie Stobart link, it's brought in, subtenants in some of their portfolio. That's given us extra things. And now there's about 12 different operating businesses within the Kalina Group that stretches from, pallet sortation, e-commerce fulfillment, chilled operations, ambient warehouse, transport depots, fleet management, industrial support services. So, you're just seeing the breadth of the supply chain, rail freight terminal handling, and that's really cool.
It's an exciting place to be.
Yeah.
Are you? You're clearly unbelievably driven. Has success changed? Has the view of success changed as the business has scaled? And are you doing what you always thought you would do when you and Nick, left your Ponzi scheme and set up
Not our Ponzi scheme.
The Ponzi scheme. You were, left the Ponzi scheme and set Roebuck up. Have you kind of like surpassed your ambition in terms of what you thought was available?
Oh yeah, look, if you'd said, I'll come back to 14 years. If someone said 14 years ago, I'd be sitting having a podcast with someone like you. You've got to.
That's not a high bar.
No, it's about as high as it gets. That's it's retirement time now. But my point is talking about a business that's bought and accumulated, AUM of circa 2.6 billion across 7 different countries in Europe. A team of 11 people. We've sold 60% to a really supportive shareholder, and we've got really big ambitions to potentially go and do a fund or a REIT, and we're doing a JV with ICG, and we've got a JV with Blackstone, and we've done work with Apollo. We're about to do one with hopefully a big Asian sovereign wealth fund, and hey, we've also been advising Eddie Stobart for the last 12, 13 years, and William Stobart's one of it. These are things that we like, no way, absolutely no way, because 2009 was a jumping in was just purely to get me out of a bad hole. And if any of my school friends are listening to this, it sadly probably won't be non-property people. But I was not an overachiever. I'm not the most academic person. I've always found exams really difficult. I found most things really difficult, but I've always worked really, really hard to overcome those things, and I've overachieved in most things I've applied to. So it sounds really arrogant. I'm not surprised that I've got to where I've got to, but would I have thought I've got to here today? No way. Am I really pleased? Absolutely. Am I sitting back, feet up on the table? No, I don't think I've ever worked harder. I think it's getting more intense. The ideas are now spinning. I'm really lucky that the team we've got, and thanks to you with certain of those guys, and exactly who I'm talking about, we've got a really cool team. It's a young team, diverse team, and different skill sets. And I now feel really comfortable and confident that everyone doing the things I used to do, from account management to analytical work to reporting to asset management to origination, I can quite literally take myself out of that, and all of those functions are happening. And that's allowing me to now think about, right, how can we get to the next thing and build the next thing here? So really pleased. I think if you asked Nick, he'd said the same thing.
Well, Hugh, it's been an amazing story and unbelievably inspiring. As we kind of draw to a close, a question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast is, if I was to give you £500 million, who are the people, what property, and which place would you look to deploy that capital? Most people, however, just before you jump into that, will go, my team and the strategy that I'm doing or the business that I'm building. And I guess I'm going to change the question a little bit to say, look, if we were to go outside of logistics, because I bet your answer would be, I'd love £500 million to do an iOS platform, existing team, couple of people, happy days, and off we go. But if I was going to say, look, outside of logistics, £500 million, outside of your team, who would you get on the journey, and what sector would you chase? Okay,
let's think about this differently. I would focus on, and this probably touches on open storage, but I'm not trying to bring in open storage, but it's probably infrastructure-based investments, because I think, the more we look at the supply chain, and I know this is touching on logistics, but infrastructure is hugely important, and I think there's probably more infrastructure which ties in renewable energy type groups, and you're going to say, I can't now think of any.
But it's definitely going that way.
It's going that way. Look, what would I not do? I wouldn't do any form of retail at the moment. I just wouldn't. And you can buy shopping centres, I hear, at 8-9% best in class, but there's no rental growth, so it's really difficult to get performance out of that, and it's a lot of management. And I'm not saying it's bad to do a lot of management, but not to generate growth. Offices, listen, we just have to read the press as daily rhetoric of how bad is the office market. So I think it'd be some form of infrastructure, ports, rail sort of terminals, infrastructure, renewable energy plays, where one thing we're going to struggle with, I think, is power. We're going to have to generate power through renewable means, and B, we're going to generate power that's not killing our grid. So it'd be finding groups that maybe do big infrastructure projects and backing them, because if you can hold out for 10 years, I think that sort of subsector within real estate, because it is sort of it's physical. Yeah.
And then in terms of the people in place, UK or European?
I think you know, I don't think the UK would be big enough. So for 500 million, so you'd probably target, you know, where Germany. You'd go to the obvious places. Germany, I think Italy. You'd look at Spain for, you know, they've got big container terminals and ports and things, and lots of product comes in from that way. And Italy and Spain have a lot of sun. You know, I am massively freestyling this as we speak, because you changed that question.
Put you on the spot, and this is going to be out there forever.
Investments can go up as well as down.
Well, Hugh, you know, in terms of, you know, your background, and like I said just a minute ago, you know, it's a phenomenally inspiring background, and I think, you know, that thread of hard work, outworking your peers, luck being just around the corner, and creating that yourself with an awesome team certainly is kind of like held you through the last 14 years. And I'm really excited to see what the next 14 years look like at Roebuck, and hope we can play a small part in supporting your growth. So thanks for joining me on the podcast, and excited to see what you and the team go on to do.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague, subscribe, give us a rating, like or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of which guests you think we should get on the podcast, or areas of the market that we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit experienced talent for real estate private equity firms, investment managers, REITs, property companies and advisory firms across the investment, asset management, development, fund management, ESG, cap markets, investor relations and general practice space. So if you're considering your career options at the moment, or looking to attract top talent to come and work for you, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you can find a wealth of resource to aid your search. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.